It wasn't just another reality TV exit. It was a breaking point. When Yandy Smith-Harris and Mendeecees Harris announced they were leaving Love and Hip Hop, fans assumed it was about money, contracts, or fatigue from years in front of the cameras. But the real story ran deeper. For nearly a decade, you were the heartbeat of the franchise. Their love, their struggles, their family. Viewers watched their highs and heartbreaks play out in real time. But what the audience didn't see was how much the spotlight cost them. Behind every confession cam and reunion, taping was a growing distance between who they were on screen and who they were at home, in private. The couple began to question everything. The authenticity of their marriage under constant scrutiny, the toll on their kids, and the mental exhaustion that came from performing their pain for entertainment. They weren't just reality stars anymore, they were storylines. When Yandy finally said, "We needed to save us before we had nothing left," it hit different. They weren't running from drama. They were reclaiming peace. For the first time in years, they chose each other over the cameras. The truth they later exposed would shake the industry, revealing what really happens when fame, family, and pressure collide. Their departure wasn't the end of a TV era. It was the beginning of their real life when Yandy and Mendeecees first started filming Love and Hip Hop, New York. They were hungry, hopeful, and grateful. Back then, the show was a stage for possibility, a place to grow brands, tell stories, and show the world that hip-hop love could look strong, successful, and real. But as the years passed, that spotlight started to burn hotter than either of them expected. Every argument, every misunderstanding, every tear was captured, edited, and turned into a meme or a headline. What had started as an opportunity to inspire others slowly became a constant test of how much of their private lives they were willing to sell. Yandy used to say, "It's just TV. They only show what we give them." But one night, sitting in the kitchen after another explosive reunion taping, Mendeecees finally said what they were both thinking. "This isn't our life anymore," he told her quietly. "It's their version of it." She didn't answer. She just stared at the half-empty glass of wine in front of her, thinking about the years of trying to balance authenticity with expectation. Their relationship had already survived years of separation while Mendeecees served time. The pressures of rebuilding after that, and the endless commentary from strangers who thought they knew them. But this, the cameras, the producers, the manipulation, felt different. It wasn't just stress. It was erosion. The first time they seriously discussed quitting came after a scene that never aired. They'd filmed a heated conversation about trust and money, one of those raw, real moments that producers live for. When the rough cut came back, the editors had spliced it to make it look like Yandy was lying about her finances. A complete distortion. She confronted production immediately. "This isn't what I said," she told them. One of the producers shrugged. "It's TV, Yandy. People need something to react to." That sentence stuck with her for weeks. People need something to react to, not to understand, not to feel, to react. Meanwhile, Mendeecees had started to notice the change in their home. Their kids were growing up on social media, classmates whispering about things they'd seen on TV. Their son once asked him, "Daddy, why are you always mad at Mommy on the show?" It broke him. "Because they want to show drama," he said softly. "But that's not who we are." Behind the scenes, they were both struggling to keep the line between reality and entertainment intact. But the show fed off blurred lines. Producers would call before filming, asking loaded questions. "You still trust Yandy, right? What do you think she's not telling you?" It was subtle manipulation, a way of seeding tension for cameras that would later explode into ratings gold. After one particularly draining reunion, Yandy left the stage in tears. Backstage, surrounded by lights and chaos, she found Mendeecees sitting alone, head in his hands. "We can't keep doing this," she whispered. He looked up, eyes red but calm. "I know." That was the moment the seed was planted. But walking away from Love and Hip Hop wasn't simple. It was their platform, their livelihood, their public identity. Leaving meant risking invisibility, something no one in reality television takes lightly. The turning point came months later when Yandy was offered another storyline, one that would pit her against another. Cast member she'd made peace with off-camera. "It'll be good TV," the executive producer told her. "People miss the old Yandy, the one who fights back." She smiled politely, but inside she felt nauseous. The old Yandy they wanted wasn't her, it was a caricature. The woman who threw shade, who argued for ratings, who cried on cue. The version that sold ad space but cost her peace that night. She went home and told Mendeecees, "They don't want our growth. They want our chaos." He nodded slowly. "Then let's stop giving it to them." They made the decision quietly, long before the public announcement. For 6 months, they filmed less and less, pulling back from key scenes, skipping promotional shoots and declining reunion appearances. The producers noticed, of course, and the tension off-camera grew. Rumors started spreading that Yandy was being difficult, that Mendeecees was checked out. But neither of them corrected it. They had bigger concerns, privately. They were trying to rebuild what the fame had strained: their communication, their intimacy, their trust. For so long, their love had been content. Now they wanted it to be sacred again. Still, quitting meant confrontation. When the network called them in for a strategy meeting, they knew it was really an intervention. Sitting across from a row of executives, they were hit with a barrage of persuasion. "Y'all are the face of the show. Cutely love your story. Think about the fans." But Yandy had made up her mind. She leaned forward, calm but firm. "I love the fans, but I love my family more. And this show doesn't love either one of us back." The room fell silent. Afterward, she and Mendeecees walked out hand in hand, past the glossy posters on the studio walls, their own smiling faces frozen in happier times. It was surreal. The brand they'd built, the empire that had made them household names, suddenly felt like a cage they were finally unlocking. Over the following weeks, they started tying up loose ends. They called their fellow castmates to share the news privately. Most were supportive, though some were skeptical. "Nobody leaves love and hip-hop," one of them said. "You just stop getting storylines." But Yandy wasn't looking for storylines anymore. She was looking for silence. For real mornings without cameras, for arguments that didn't need a mic check, for laughter that wasn't captured in HD. Their official exit announcement came months later, a joint post with a simple caption: "Sometimes you have to step away from the noise to hear your heart again." Fans flooded the comments with disbelief, sadness, and love. Many begged them to reconsider. Others said it was about time. But the one thing everyone agreed on: it felt like the end of an era. What the world didn't know then was that their departure wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. They had been working quietly on something new, a production company dedicated to telling real stories without the manipulation of traditional reality TV. They wanted to show what reality looked like when it wasn't. Edited to sell drama, the irony wasn't lost on them. The same couple that had once embodied reality television's biggest franchise was now walking away to create their own version of authenticity. In interviews afterward, Yandy spoke openly about the mental toll the show had taken. "Every time you film, you relive pain," she said. "You argue for the cameras, then go home and try to rebuild what you just broke for the scene. It's exhausting. We lost ourselves in trying to entertain people who didn't know what it cost," Mendeecees added. "I had to remember that my kids were watching. My son told me one day, 'Dad, I don't want to be on TV anymore.' That hit me. That's when I knew we had to stop." It wasn't an easy transition. Walking away from fame never is. For months, they struggled with the sudden quiet, no schedules, no production calls, no public drama to distract them from private issues. But slowly, they began to rediscover what peace actually felt like. They started traveling more, spending weekends offline, building businesses that didn't depend on controversy. And with time, their marriage, once stretched thin by the demands of reality TV, began to breathe again when asked later if they'd ever return to love and hip-hop. Yandy smiled knowingly. "We'll always love what it gave us," she said, "but we're not going back to the version of ourselves that survived it." For the first time in years, they weren't performing love. They were living it. Performing love. They were living it. The decision to leave Love and Hip Hop sent ripples through the entire franchise. Within hours of Yandy and Mendeecees' exit post, blogs exploded with speculation. Some said they'd been fired. Others claimed they were holding out for more money. A few accused them of being too good for the show now. But none of those rumors were true. The real story, the one the cameras never caught, was much deeper. Behind closed doors, both Yandy and Mendeecees had been quietly unraveling for months. The constant spotlight, the staged conflicts, the online harassment, it had all taken a toll. Yandy had reached a point where she couldn't even scroll through social media without feeling anxious. "It got to where I couldn't tell if I was living my life or defending it," she admitted later. Every post turned into an argument. Every episode became a public trial. And Mendeecees, who had spent years rebuilding his reputation after prison, was beginning to resent the way the show reduced him to a caricature. The ex-con husband, the silent supporter, the man always struggling to do right. They never showed the growth. He told a friend, "Just the drama. I'm more than what they edit me to be." When the producers realized the couple was serious about leaving, they tried everything to keep them. They offered new storylines, a bigger paycheck, even a spin-off show focusing on their family. But the couple wasn't tempted. "You can't buy back peace," Yandy said firmly. The breaking point came during what was supposed to be their final season. The producers pushed a narrative suggesting Mendeecees was emotionally detached from Yandy, that their marriage was crumbling quietly behind the scenes. In reality, the two were closer than ever, but that didn't matter. The edit told a different story. When the episode aired, the backlash hit immediately. Comment sections flooded with people accusing Mendeecees of not loving his wife enough, quoting his previous remarks about being unsure if he'd stay if the roles were reversed, the same comment he'd made years ago. In a completely different context, was weaponized again for ratings that night. Yandy sat in bed scrolling through thousands of comments. She wasn't angry, she was exhausted. She turned to Mendeecees and said quietly, "They'll never stop unless we stop giving them pieces of us." He nodded. "Then it's time." From that moment, they went dark. No more confessionals, no more interviews, no more promotional teasers. The crew tried reaching out, but Yandy ignored every call. They'd already filmed their goodbye, not for TV, but for themselves. In the weeks that followed, the couple focused on reclaiming the parts of their life that had been turned into content. They deleted old posts, stopped responding to gossip blogs, and started doing the one thing they hadn't done in years, living without an audience. For the first time, their mornings weren't filled with makeup chairs or camera setups. Their arguments stayed private. Their laughter belonged to them again. But the transition wasn't easy. Fame has a way of making silence feel like failure. Yandy found herself questioning if they'd made the right choice. "The quiet felt strange," she later said. "When you're used to being seen, peace almost feels like punishment at first." Mendeecees understood that feeling all too well. "We'd gotten addicted to being relevant," he admitted. "Not because we needed the fame, but because the world made us feel like our value depended on being watched." The couple began to rebuild from the inside out. Yandy poured her energy into community work, launching mentorship programs for young women in New York. She started speaking at colleges, not about TV or fame, but about boundaries, balance, and protecting your identity in a world that profits from your pain. Mendeecees focused on creating a mentorship project for at-risk youth, using his past not as shame but as a lesson. "If the cameras only showed my mistakes," he said, "then I'll use my real life to show my growth." Their fans, surprisingly, followed them into this new chapter. Instead of fading away, their audience evolved. People were drawn to their authenticity, their willingness to be transparent without being performative. Still, the industry missed them. Producers kept calling, networks kept offering deals, and rumors of their return surfaced every few months. But each time, Yandy and Mendeecees stood firm. They'd learned that every time you reopen a door for validation, you risk losing the peace you fought for. Then came the interview that sealed their legacy. Sitting side by side on a minimalist set, no glam, no background music, just 2 chairs and 2 microphones. They finally told the truth. Yandy spoke first. We didn't leave because of drama. We left because the show stopped feeling like ours. Every time we tried to show growth, it got edited out. Every time we tried to show peace, they cut it for chaos. And that's not life, that's business. Mendeecees nodded. When I got home from prison, I thought the cameras would help people see my change. But after a while, I realized I was performing healing instead of living it. And you can't grow when you're playing yourself for an audience. The interviewer leaned in. So this is goodbye for good. Yandy smiled. It's not goodbye. It's just finally choosing to live off script. The clip went viral within hours, not because it was messy, but because it was real. Fans called it the most honest interview in love and hip-hop history. Even former cast members reached out privately, thanking them for saying what everyone else had been too afraid to admit. That moment marked the start of something new, free from contracts and controlled narratives. Yandy and Mendeecees began producing their own content, not reality television, but reality stories, documentaries about love, entrepreneurship, and second chances. Their first project, titled Unedited, premiered online and broke streaming records for independent Black creators. It was proof that walking away from a machine didn't mean disappearing. It meant reclaiming ownership. In one behind-the-scenes moment, captured on their own terms, Yandy summed it up perfectly. They built a show out of our love story, but we're the ones who get to write the ending. And just like that, what began as an escape from noise became a masterclass in taking your power back, not just from the cameras, but from the version of yourself the world insists on keeping. The first few months after their departure were calm on the surface, but quietly unsettling underneath. Yandy and Mendeecees had stepped off the merry-go-round, but their bodies and minds were still spinning. Every morning felt strange without call times, stylists, or producers asking for one more take. For the first time in a decade, no one was telling them when to smile, argue, or cry. At first, the silence was disorienting. Yandy would wake up before sunrise, scrolling through her phone out of habit, waiting for an email that would never come. Then she'd catch herself and laugh. Old reflex, she'd whisper. Mendeecees, meanwhile, found himself pacing the house at night, restless. It's weird, he told her one evening. We got everything we asked for: peace, privacy, and I still feel like I'm missing something. Yandy reached for his hand. You're missing the noise, she said. Give it time. Peace feels empty until you fill it with purpose. Slowly, that purpose began to... Mendeecees began producing short films about second chances, stories of men who turned pain into purpose. One of his documentaries, Broken Chain, premiered at a local film festival and earned a standing ovation. Watching from the front row, Yandy wiped away tears. See? She whispered. That's the real show. They were slowly rewriting their story, but the industry couldn't let go. Producers reached out again, this time offering a healing reunion special. They declined politely but firmly. Healing doesn't need ratings, Yandy said. Instead, they created their own digital series called Harris Home, a raw, unfiltered look at family life without scripts. No dramatic music, no manipulated storylines, just daily conversations about love, parenting, and resilience. It didn't have the fireworks of love and hip-hop, but fans adored it. The comments were filled with gratitude. Thank you for showing real growth. This is what we needed. For the first time, they were controlling the narrative, and it changed everything. Months later, at a speaking event in Atlanta, a young woman approached Yandy in tears. I left an unhealthy relationship after watching you walk away from the show, she said. You made me realize I don't have to perform strength to be strong. Yandy hugged her tightly. That's the reason, she whispered. That night, she told Mendeecees, maybe quitting wasn't an ending. Maybe it was our beginning. He smiled. Sometimes you've got to lose the spotlight to find the light. Still, fame has its ghosts. Every now and then, a new rumor would surface, claims they were struggling financially, or that they secretly regretted leaving. Each time Yandy ignored it. But privately, she wrestled with the adjustment. She missed the adrenaline, the validation, the rush of trending topics. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked him one night. Sometimes, he admitted. "But then I remember the peace. I'd rather be unknown and happy than famous and broken." That became their motto. The years that followed proved that peace doesn't mean silence. It means control. They turned down projects that didn't align with their values, invested in businesses that empowered their community, and raised their children in an environment free from constant cameras. Their marriage, once a storyline, became a sanctuary. The same fans who had watched them argue on television were now watching them grow in real time, this time by choice. They began hosting workshops together titled Unscripted Love, teaching couples how to set boundaries, communicate through chaos, and protect their relationships from public judgment. The irony wasn't lost on them. The couple, once defined by televised arguments, had become guides for healthy communication. During one of those sessions, an audience member asked if you could go back. "Would you still do the show?" Yandy thought for a long moment before answering. "Yes," she said finally, "because it showed us who we never want to be again." Mendeecees nodded. "It taught us the cost of exposure, but it also gave us the strength to walk away." Their journey came full circle a few years later. When the network reached out to feature them in a documentary celebrating the show's legacy, this time they agreed, but on one condition: full creative control. The producers reluctantly accepted. And the resulting special was unlike anything the franchise had ever aired. Instead of glam and gossip, it was honest, introspective, and raw. The final scene showed Yandy and Mendeecees standing outside their old set, looking back at the lights that once defined them. "This was home for a while," Yandy said softly, "but home isn't a set. It's the peace you build when the cameras go off." The episode ended with a simple caption: "Sometimes the greatest success story is knowing when to leave." When it aired, fans flooded social media with gratitude. For once, the message wasn't about drama, it was about growth in the months that followed. Yandy and Mendeecees leaned fully into their next chapter. They launched a podcast discussing love, faith, and personal evolution. The first episode opened with Yandy's calm, confident voice. "We walked away from a show that made us famous, but we walked toward the life that makes us whole." And that was the truth, the one that tabloids could never twist. They hadn't quit for scandal, money, or pride. They quit because the noise was drowning out the love that built everything they had. Today, people ask them about love and hip-hop. They don't speak with bitterness. They speak with gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons, for the platform, for the mistakes that led them home. "Reality TV gave us exposure," Yandy says now, smiling. "But real life gave us peace." And that's the real reason they left. Not because they had to, but because they finally understood that peace, once earned, is too precious to risk for applause. In the end, Yandy and Mendeecees didn't walk away from love and hip-hop out of pride. They walked away out of purpose. What the world saw as an exit was really an evolution. For years, they had lived their love under a microscope, edited and re-edited until it no longer looked like the truth. When they finally chose to turn off the cameras, it wasn't a loss, it was liberation. They reminded everyone that growth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to stop performing pain for people who only tune in for chaos. They learned that peace isn't found in applause or trending topics, but in the small, sacred spaces where no one's watching. Their story became a blueprint for anyone stuck between obligation and authenticity. You don't owe the world your wounds just because it once clapped for your struggle. The real courage isn't in staying visible, it's in walking away. When fame starts costing your soul, so if there's one takeaway from their journey, it's this: protect your peace even when it means letting go of everything familiar. Reclaim your story before someone else edits it for you. Because the truest kind of success isn't being watched, it's being whole. That's the legacy Yandy and Mendeecees built. Not reality TV royalty, but real-life freedom. And for the first time, their love isn't being filmed, it's finally being lived. Finally being lived.